You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who's always walked your own path, but now feel like you've lost your way, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you back to yourself and to help you reconnect with your joy, your passion, and your purpose. Midlife knocked me sideways. I was not prepared for all the challenges that piled up one by one. Everything in my life felt like it was imploding, including my health and my sense of self. By the time I hit 50, I was completely lost. But here's the good part. I'm finding my way, and so can you. I'll be dropping episodes every Thursday on everything from ambivalent aging, to body changes, to relationship shifts, to career challenges, financial fears, crazy family dynamics, and spiritual awakenings. Some weeks I'll be musing, some weeks I'll be ranting, and sometimes I'll have amazing guests who will share their expertise with you. Midlife brings a lot of change and a lot of challenges, but there's also so much magic to be uncovered. Let's dive in. Amy Weiland Daughters is a keynote speaker, letter writer, satirist, sports journalist, and the author of the newly minted book, You Cannot Mess This Up, a true story that never happened. I loved this book, and I loved talking to Amy about time travel of a sorts and nostalgia for the 70s and 80s and living the life that you never had. This book was heartfelt and beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this interview with you. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited to talk to you about your book. It's interesting. And we'll get into it, but one of the things that really struck me about this is I just lost my second parent 4 months ago, and I relate so much to the concept of the book. Like you really do kind of go back in time when you're going through all the things, and it brings up so many memories and so many thoughts and so many wishes of how things were and how you wished they could be and how you wished you could rewrite history in so many ways. And
Right.
such a tender concept. How did this come to you? Is it one of those things where the idea just landed on you?
Yeah, I had kicked it around just to back it up just a little bit. I had gotten a business degree when I went to school. And so I spent like 15 years in purchasing and like moved my way up. And my husband and I were both in a good spot. And his company said, "Do you want to move to the UK for 3 years?" And we thought, oh my gosh, what an adventure in our 30s to go do with one kid. That's all we had at the time. And they were going to ship us off this little village in the middle of England. So it wasn't like we were in London. We were like, yeah, because we were like, we could travel Europe. I mean, we could afford to travel Europe that way. And so we went. And this sounds so dumb, but I was like, what do I do with all this time? Because I didn't have a work visa. So I went to the like local university and started taking history classes because I thought, oh, that'll be good. But the kid goes to school and I'm like, these are a lot of hours in this day for me to try to figure out what I'm going to do with. So, I mean, there's only so many castles you can go see, and so I'd always written on the side. I'd always written short stories, or I'd look at my emails at work and be like, oh, that was profound when I wrote about the picnic, or I was hilarious. So I just started writing almost out of desperation. And then I realized, oh, people pay you. This was kind of more like right when the internet switched over from dial up. I was like, I can make money doing this. So by the time I got back to the United States, I was pregnant. So I needed like 9 more months. And then by the time that was over, I created this little niche for myself where I'd almost replaced my income writing. And so the whole time I'm writing and I'm not taking myself seriously because I had a little bit of an imposter syndrome because I wasn't trained to write. I was trained in business. And so I finally had an editor. I had this contract to write college football for the Bleacher Report. And that was kind of my main thing. And I had this editor take me so seriously. I was like, wait a second. Like, I think I'm actually like, I could be good at this. And so I had this book idea about traveling back in time to my childhood. And I'd had it probably since before England. And so that editor got me in a mindset where I was like, I can do this. So I just sat down and started writing this book, not thinking it was ever going to publish, not thinking I was ever going to talk to you on a Sunday morning in 2025 about this book, you know? So I wrote the book, and my whole intention was I'm going to write a really funny back in time book, like nostalgic. I'm gonna go get the Sears catalog out and really get into it. And it's gonna be hilarious because how funny would it be to be stuck back in time and have to visit your 10-year-old self and everybody thinks you're a stranger, but you're related in some way. Then when I got into it, I was like, oh my goodness, if you're gonna go back in time to your 10-year-old self and your parents are gonna be the same age as you and your brother and sister are gonna be there, feelings.com. And I didn't realize it was a cathartic journey. And the
Yeah.
person I started writing that book, one person, and I came out the other end, a whole nother person.
Tell me about that. Like, who were you when you went into it, and who were you when you came out of it? Did you see your family differently? Did you see your parents differently? Because
And there's,
the characters are
yeah,
based on your family, correct?
right. And that happened on so many different layers. We'll kind of have to unpack it. But, you know, yeah, I like to tell the book is like a memoir wrapped up in the tortilla of time travel. So
Hmm.
so it's fictional. And so many of the memories are probably 85% of it is what I remembered as a 10-year-old. Now the dialogue, obviously I made up, and some of the adult cutaway scenes where the kids are not in the room, well, that's totally made up. But I did, speak with my parents and, got some idea of what their perspective was during that time period, what they could remember. So I went into that. So there's several different layers to that. First of all, my relationship with myself. You know, I went into that. I like holed up in a hotel room, like the 70s resort in Ohio, a couple of weekends with the VCR tapes and the photo albums, and I literally tried to submerge myself back in time. So did I go back in time? No, but did I go back in time in my own head? 100%. And writing this book made me feel like this is an actual thing that happened in my life. And that sounds crazy, but that's the truth. And so I watched Little Amy and I was like, are you kidding me? Bowl cut, weird glasses, like she should have been on ADHD medicine. I mean, I watched actual videos and this girl is tearing it up. I mean, she's unique and funny. And I was like, oh my God, stop, stop right now. I was like a little horrified and embarrassed. But by the time I got to the end of the journey of writing the book and making the story up, I was like, you know what? I went from wanting to run from her, and this is in the book, to kind of wanting to be her. Because I was like, all that unique, quirky, like bizarre, bug-eyed stuff with it, like behind all that was this person that had so many admirable qualities that I had lived away, not on purpose, but that's what real life does to you. It kicks you around a little bit. You forget, you lose sight. And now I see little Amy as like an independent uh, entity. You, and I'm sorry that you lost your second parent. I still have one left. But when this book was about to go to print, my dad had just read it and he sent me a text, and my dad and I were BFFs, and then he died suddenly before the book actually came out. And so that made the emotional things for everyone involved was different. The stakes were higher then because he had passed away. But I had thought about little Amy so differently. I kept thinking, I don't want to tell her. I don't want to tell little Amy that dad died because she's going to be devastated. But I saw myself as this separate entity, my little self, and I didn't want to disappoint her. And I really have lived my life since then, not completely. I mean, I have a lot, like we all do. I have a lot, layers to me, but I want to make little Amy proud. I want to represent little Amy for the rest of my life in a way that little Amy would be like, hell yeah, let's go, big Amy.
Well, the timing of this is so interesting because I am well, I'm a therapist and I'm transitioning into coaching. And my coaching concept is working with women in midlife, but walking her through the four stages of a woman's life. The maiden, the mother, whether or not she was a mother, doesn't matter, like that phase of life. The empress, which is midlife, and the crone, which is old age, and going through each stage and processing the gifts and the wounds of each stage. And right now is spring. We're recording this in spring, and we're in the season of the maiden, of the little girl. So it's so interesting we're talking about this today because I, as a therapist, I hate like the whole brouhaha around like inner child work. There was something about it that just felt so icky and gross to me.
Right.
And but reconnecting with that wild, weird, quirky, free, goofy, fun, expressive child that maybe that gets squashed, when we go into the workforce, or even like college, maybe it's like you can't be that person anymore. You have to fit in. Like, stop wearing your roller skates and your side ponytail and all the things you think are cool. Guess what? They're not cool. You're not cool. Like, fit in, but little kids, like, they don't care about fitting in.
Right. Right. And I accidentally watched myself from the outside in, just trying to create the story in my head as a 48-year-old, 50-year-old, I don't know, a midlife person. I wrote it. I just watched her and I was like, wow, first of all, get away from me. You're nuts. Second of all, oh my God, you're exactly right. I think it was high school for me where I was like, wait a second, you know, this isn't going to work anymore. And it's probably why I loved summer camp so much because they celebrated it more. Like summer camp extends your experience of being yourself, because it's a short window. Nobody's wearing makeup. It's just a different environment. And, you're out there and you're valued for different things, I believe. That's just my own experience. It's probably not true anymore, but yeah, so I accidentally saw myself as myself and celebrated it at the end of a story that I was just trying to write because I was trying to write a funny back in time book.
Yeah.
Who knew?
But you reconnected to that part of yourself that we have before we start caring what other people think of us.
And that's perfectly put. And I think that is a key element. Little Amy didn't care what everyone else thought.
She
Unless
didn't.
she got in trouble, then she cared.
Right.
Like she cared about the mom-daughter relationship only because she just wanted to be able to do what she wanted to do.
Right. But she didn't care if people thought she was weird or she wanted to wear her knee socks all the way up or whatever it is that you get made fun of. Well, you can't do. Like, once you hit puberty and you start worrying about fitting in and other girls and what other girls think of you or what the boys are going to think of you. It's
And
so, it's
and
such
we
a,
still do that. We still,
ugh,
and that's what, social media propagates that. And I don't want to villainize completely because I think it's more nuanced than that. But that comparing, it just gets completely multiplied. We live in this climate now as women where, it takes that little part of us and just boom, blows it up.
absolutely. I love that you found so much admiration and you were cheering your 10-year-old self on when you came
Oh,
out.
right. And there's a scene where because I've always grown up loving sports, and it's funny when I wrote this book, I started to see myself. I was like, oh, that's where it started. Like me sorting the baseball cards in my bathroom floor with the green shag carpet at night. That's the beginning of me writing about college football. And I had not really made, and I think it's just an appreciation thing. I hadn't made that connection, like I hadn't locked that in my mind. But there's a scene where we're playing football outside at Thanksgiving, like tag football, and I'm playing with the guys. I'm the only girl out there. And the other girls are out there watching, but I'm the only one out there and I'm 10. So I don't get it yet. I got it watching me. But then I make this catch that I remember and I kind of juked this guy and I ran down, scored a touchdown. And I was like, and I'm just cheering, like I'm walking away from that going, this is who we are. We're badasses. And little Amy's just standing there, not making a big deal. And I was like, she knows she's been there. She acts like she's been there. Big Amy, I can't pull that off. I think about navigating being a woman sports writer, and
Yeah.
that was an interesting journey for me. And somebody who could hang with the guys for sure. But you have this, which is also an advantage in a backhanded kind of way, because you're the girl who knows more than most of the guys, but because I care about it too much. But here she is celebrating it because she doesn't even see it, and I could have used a lot of her when I got started, because she
Sure.
had it. Yeah.
Yeah. I try really hard to remember when I was brave enough to leap before I looked, examined, calculated, worried, thought, talked to other people, talked to somebody else, got a whole bunch of opinions before I made any decision. I try to remember when I was a little kid when I would just, throw on whatever crazy thing I was going to wear and ran out of the house like with my ideas and excitement and enthusiasm
Right. And total belief in
and
yourself.
total belief. Absolutely.
Imagine living in a world where we totally believed in ourselves.
Oh my God. I know. I know we would be so different. We would live so differently. Did writing the book also, and I imagine it did, but I'd love you to speak to it a little bit. Did it change your perception of your parents' marriage? Did it give you more compassion for them? Did it make you see them differently? Because that's
Uh,
another thing that comes up in midlife, especially as your parents get older, get sick, pass away, is that you start to see them less as your parents and more as just other people, like other humans.
well, that was one of the another layer of the gift of this writing a story because I had, like a lot of people do, I had a more complicated relationship with my mother than I did with my father. But when I dropped myself in to 1978 as a woman and as a mom, as a wife, I was like, wait a second, this woman is killing it without the internet. I mean, she is, because I came downstairs in the story the day after Thanksgiving and I'm looking around like, where's the mess? Where's the laundry? She's got five people up in here. And then she had me there. There was a party that night that I knew nothing about when I was a kid, but that's a good scene because there's like lots of smoking and polyester and, chest hair, man bold. But so where was the mess? And this, my mother was just doing it. No one thanked her for anything. I mean, she pulls off the Thanksgiving dinner. She's expected to do all these things. She had this typewriter. She used to want to write about nostalgia like Hollywood. And I look at that typewriter and I'm like, she wasn't afforded any of the opportunities. She didn't have, my dad was a great guy, but she wasn't going to have his support like I have my spouse's support. Like my whole writing thing wouldn't have taken off without somebody going, yeah, that seems like a good idea, for you to spend all your time doing that. And she didn't have any of that because that's when she lived. She lived in 1978 where there weren't girls trips, where there wasn't outlets, there wasn't things that, there wasn't even jazzercise yet. She didn't have any of that. And I watched her and I was like, my dad's a great guy, but is this really what she wanted? Did she want to be a suburban housewife? I mean, did she want to be stuck here? I mean, like she's got it all. This woman had everything, but did she, because we were, middle class, upper middle class, but is this what she wanted? Is this because nobody asked her what she wanted? This was what she was expected to do. And she seemed happy, but she also seemed repressed as I looked at her as a same-aged woman from another time, you
Yeah.
know?
I think of my own mom who is deceased, but I think of everything that she managed and managed very well with no real support. She kept the house reasonably clean. She got us to and from school. She served a three-course dinner almost every single night. She dealt with my dad. My dad was very difficult. She dealt with my dad. She packed him for all his business trips. He traveled everywhere all the time because that's how he supported us. And she held things up. And you're right, like no internet, maybe handwritten recipes, maybe out of, Ladies' Home Journal or Better Home and Gardens or whatever, but mostly things she just sort of made up with like whatever we had left over in the house.
Right,
She's
right.
so resourceful.
When they weren't expected to go spend a bunch of money on things, either like they didn't run out to the mall, they didn't get on the Zon,
No.
and order the things they needed. They just did it. I had a whole other appreciation for my mom as a woman, as a mother, and she loved that. I mean, there were parts of the book that were difficult for her to read because of our relationship, but I think we came out of it. She was really fascinated with the idea that I would question, like, was she happy in that marriage? Because everyone just celebrated dad, because dad was out of the box thinker, just a great human being. He really was, but to be married to him, that's a whole nother thing. He was a good husband and a good provider, and he wasn't necessarily overtly difficult, but he also, the whole world worked for him. It was propped up for these guys to do things, whether it was easy or not. It was the road was a lot clearer for them as opposed to, the experience we have as women now.
Absolutely. I think we have more freedom than we've ever had
Right.
as people, but specifically as women. But and I think we're probably the first Gen X is the first generation that has had the luxury to really think like, am I even happy? Or I don't think my mother really thought about happiness.
No,
I
no,
don't
I
think
don't.
it was like
Yeah.
I know that she wasn't all that happy, but I don't think she thought about it. I don't think she sat around and thought about how can I fix my unhappiness? How can I self-improvement and self-help? This was not in my mother's vocabulary, lexicon. The only
Right.
self-improvement she ever thought about was losing weight, which she didn't need to lose. But I mean,
Yeah, no, but they were focused on that like we are to some
yeah,
degree now. But you think about you as her daughter, the evolution of this story, of your story. I mean, you're a woman and a coach. You're a resource that your mom could have never had. If you think about that, that's kind of like mind blowing, mind blowing, you
it is
know?
absolutely mind-blowing. You're right. I mean, my parents, your parents' generation, our parents' generation, you didn't even go to therapy unless you were absolutely, something was really wrong with you and it was
Right,
really shameful. It
right,
wasn't like a routine thing that like everyone goes to therapy. I grew up in New York City and everyone goes to therapy in New York, like it as when I was in my 20s and 30s, but not when I was a child. And
right,
certainly my parents, they never would go to therapy. Oh my God, they'd go talk to the priest, maybe,
right.
but something
But
would really,
everybody would have been talking about that. And that's what's one thing that stayed the same because that scene at the party, I have a bunch of people in the half bath talking about everybody else who's not in the half bath because that's such a universal. Now we have Facebook to do it. Like we can go do it on a text. We can side text everyone
oh,
about what so and such. But that kind of stuff doesn't change. The narrative of relationships and neighbors and suburbia, because I grew up in suburbia outside of Houston, Texas, in this, idyllic situation, that when you really open up all the doors, there's no way it can be completely idyllic because it's human relationships.
absolutely. So, okay, for the people who have not read your book but are going to be enticed by listening to this conversation, give everyone like a background of where the book takes place, what the general synopsis of the book is, just so it's more clear so people aren't jumping into
Right,
the conversation like, what are they even talking about?
right. Well, and the book is set I grew up outside of Houston, the north side of Houston. So it's set there. And basically, I live in
Yeah.
Ohio. What's
What year?
that?
What year is it?
1978. And so I go from like 2015 back to 1978. So the setting is I'm living in Ohio, which I did live in Ohio when I wrote the book. And I'm a writer, who writes from home. So my kids are in and out. And the whole premise is I'm supposed to fly down to talk about my parents' estate. They're both living in the book, but we're going to discuss like what's going to happen afterwards. So there's a meeting where I have to sign papers and the meeting gets moved up. So I get on this little plane that my husband's boss's wife flies, which is a true thing. They have this plane and they fly it. So I've been on it once. So I thought, oh, I can write about this because it's a very unique experience. So I get on this little plane and fly back to Houston to make this meeting. I go back in time. I fall asleep on the plane. I wake up. I'm wearing polyester pants look like they came from the Scotch tape dispenser, and so we land in Houston at a different airport near where I grew up. My little time travel guide, who's the pilot, my husband's boss's wife, who's a real person, she drives me. She doesn't really tell me what's going on. I know there's something different because there's chest hair all over the place and the cars are all different. And, it's obviously completely an altered universe, but she doesn't comment on that. We drive and I know we're kind of going near the neighborhood I grew up in. We pull up in front of my elementary school and she's like, here's the deal. It's 1978. I'm going to drop you off at your parents' house. They think you're a distant cousin from Ohio who's stuck here because they were meeting an editor, and they can't get back to Ohio for Thanksgiving. So you're going to spend Thanksgiving with them. You're going to be there for 36 hours. There's no option of getting out of this. I'm going to drive you over there and you get out of the car. So she drives me to the house. We park in front of my childhood home. And I basically like, I can't do it. She's like, I don't care. Get out of the car. You got to go. So I get out of the car with his luggage with no wheels. And I, like slowly hesitate and go up the front door, front doorbell. My dad, who's the same age as me, opens the door and the chaos ensues. I have 36 hours to survive this entire Thanksgiving dinner. Plus, they have to deal with me most of the next day after Thanksgiving. I got to spend the night there. My 10-year-old self is there. My older sister, who's 12 in the story, and my younger brother, who's 8 in the story. My friends of yore, my childhood BFFs. So we're all there together for 36 hours. Nobody really knows who I am. I'm just some distant relation that my mother is not super happy that I'm there because that's how she would have been because it's an intruder. So we do Thanksgiving. We go to the mall the next day, which is incredible because that's a great scene because 1978, the mall, that's a whole nother world. Then I go back to the future.
Wow. I think that if I was transported back to 1978 and I was confronted with my childhood best friend, with the boy down the street who I had a crush on, with my grandfather as I remember him, I think, first of all, I would be shocked at how young everybody was.
Right. And that was a big takeaway because all four of my grandparents are in the story. And for readers, I mean, the first thing readers do is do exactly what you're doing. What would this look like for me? But the most emotional responses I've gotten people are the four dead grandparents
Yeah.
and the dog. The
Right.
dog comes, my childhood dog runs up beside me, and the dog people, like the dog lovers, that they lose their mind about the dog.
Oh, it's all right. It would be, our cat, Cinnamon. It would be my grandfather, who's really the only grandparent I remember. It would be the smells. And I think I would be, if I would, there's the guest, the guest that was dropped from the future, I'd have to go into the bathroom and cry.
That's funny because I get nauseous over and over again in the story, and he takes me up to the room I'm going to stay in almost right away, and I sit on a chair with my hand in my hair. So I'm like, like this is not happening. This isn't real, but it feels real. All those things. I go splash my face with water and then realize I don't know how to put 70s makeup on appropriately. So I'm like, oh, I screwed it up, and I get the makeup bag out. And yeah, no, there's many moments my grandparents walk in. I feel like I'm going to pass out sideways, because it's just too much. But I'm protected by the fact that no one knows who I am. And I'm protected by the fact that if you told anybody that, you'd sound like an absolute insane person. So I'm protected by the fact that it can't be real.
I think when we get to the middle of our life, we do get very nostalgic and very reflective. And I think that's a big part of the developmental process of for women, when you hit menopause and you're at this point in your life where you've lived a good number of years and you've made all kinds of decisions, and life may or may not have gone the way you had hoped it would go. And then you have this future ahead of you because for most of us, all the really hard things happen, right? Between 40 and 60, right? We usually lose both our parents. That's probably the most common ages, right? Between 40 and 60 to lose your parents, to possibly like a health issue in there. Reevaluate your primary relationship, whether it's a marriage or a long-term relationship. Your kids, if you have kids, they're launching at that age. I think it's a real time of reckoning and reflection. And I think this book really speaks to that in a lot of ways because you're seeing your parents' own reckoning too.
Right. Right. And yeah, no, you're seeing that through, yeah. And it's such a different lens because you're watching the memories you made, your core memories, and you're watching them and thinking, I didn't remember. And I think that's careful to change that wording. I remembered it the best I could because I was 10 and didn't know what I was doing. But if I was going to re-remember it as this person in this body, I'd be like, wait a second, it wasn't quite right. But I think by the end, I also respected the fact that she did the best she could. The 10-year-old version of me did the best she could. And she didn't need to know everything I knew. She just needed to get through that part of her life and being okay with that. But also realizing that the way I remembered everything would have been different had I gone back and seen it again. So it let everyone off the hook. Like mom and dad were doing the best they could. You know, my sister who I was jealous of, she was doing the best she could and she loved me. My brother and sister knew I was a freak and they fully celebrated it. And so it enhanced every single one of those relationships. And I also looked at my own children and thought, oh my God, one, I hope they don't write a back in time book. I hope they give me the grace that I ended with my parents, not that I began with. Everyone was just doing the best they could. And and I think the biggest takeaway for me was, hey, I just lived this regular suburban life. Yes, there was problems, but it's not going to be on the Oprah Winfrey show. But
Right.
you know what? It matters. It matters enough to talk about, to investigate, to unpack with people who love me and care about me. And it matters enough that I can put it in a book blindly, almost stupidly, put it out there for people to read and stand behind it and say, this is my story.
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit about, if you don't mind, and if this isn't too personal, how the difficulties in your relationship with your mom and how they changed, how your perspective changed through the writing process of this book?
Right. And that's probably one of the top two takeaways from the book because mom and I struggled, and I felt like coming into writing this book that I was the least favorite out of the three of us, but I felt like I was a little bit of a victim in saying that. Like I didn't really take that seriously. Then my dad sat down with me, and this is in the book. He was in Ohio watching our kids, and we sat down one night. We were drinking a beer, and he just looked at me, and said, the hardest times I had with your mom was about you. He said, I tried to protect you, but I just couldn't. There was something about you that she didn't like. And then after that, that was so eye-opening. I remember I went and took a bath that night. I don't cry. And I just cried. I was like, wait a second. It was like validation. Like, this is how I felt. And then I had a conversation with my aunt that was very similar that I initiated just because I wanted to know what her perspective on it was. And she said, no, absolutely. And my brother and sister said the same thing. And so I kind of investigate that in the book when I'm writing it. Like I watch her treat me differently, but I also see how much she loved me, how she was trying to control. She needed to fit into a box. She needed desperately. She had a horrible relationship with her mother. My mom drank too much. Her mom drank too much, but she had this horrible relationship with her mother. She felt so judged, and she just needed us all to fit into a box. That's what she needed.
I just want to jump on that because that's so essential. I also had a difficult relationship for different reasons with both my parents, but my mother was also a very heavy drinker. And I think maybe your mom, do you think, let me not say it in a, let me ask you for your reflection on it. Do you think maybe your mom was a little bit afraid of you, threatened by you, maybe judgmental of your freedom, like of your exuberant like little girl
Right.
spirit? Do you think maybe that was threatening to her because she knew she couldn't make you like squish into the box and that she felt like so constrained by?
Right. I think that was part of it. And I think she saw herself in me. And I think that she didn't like, I was so close to my dad that he protected me. And so she saw that as me having an advantage over the other two. And I don't think she liked that,
Mhm.
but I do think she saw, and I do think, and then the other thing was she needed me desperately to fit into this because she was trying to fit in so desperately. And she struggled with herself so, profoundly that she needed the three of us to get in the box. And the other two stayed in the box. It's hilarious until they got older and then they got out of the box and I went back in the box a little bit. My adult life has been two kids, husband, suburban house, except for, I've written and done crazy stuff, but
Yeah.
not outside the lines. But my brother and sister, they almost did it opposite. But anyway, yeah, and I think that's why she drank. So I wrote the book, and if I wrote it again now, I'd write some of that differently because we've come to a different place because of the book. So she read the book, and I was so afraid for her to read it. But I will tell you this, Kate, she showed up at the front of every book signing and sat there like so much grace, and almost to the point where I was like, oh, did she read it? But she was going to stand up beside me no matter what I said. And like I said, she was really loved the parts where I questioned how happy she was in that time. At the end of the book, I realized I need to go talk to her. We've got to have real words about this. So I went and talked to her, and I sat down, and it was like 4 minutes. Like that's as brave as either of us could be, probably. And I was like, Mom, this is what I remember. Because there was stuff that went on that was wrong. And again, it's not this story of something so horrible. It's not that. It was very nuanced. And I told her this is what I remember. I feel like I'm your least favorite. These are some of the things I remember. And very naturally, she pushed back on some of it and was like, well, that's not the way I remember it. But then we both cried, and she said, there was stuff that happened that shouldn't have happened, but I don't think your memories are completely valid, which is completely her take on it. But it changed everything because we didn't agree on all the finer points of what had happened, nor did we try to discuss them. But all of a sudden, me just saying that stuff to her, it freed the two of us to stop acting like it never happened.
Yeah.
Like we're living in the land of honesty. And she has apologized to me a bunch of times since then. And I've apologized to her because I realized from writing the book that I didn't have it all right, that She did have control over that time, but I also was off the hook because that stuff that made me cringe at the beginning of the book, she had to live through that as my mother,
Yeah.
and so that's what's so it was so life-changing from the process. And it wasn't just writing the book, it was sharing the story. Sharing the story was also a powerful experience because, like I said, we had to stand by it. Mom had to stand by it. I had to stand by it. I had all the power then because I wrote the book, you know.
Yeah, that is, to use a word you used earlier, it's a very profound insight and opportunity for both you and your mom. And it's amazing that your mom has been able to read the book and show up for it and and have it open an amazing conversation between the two of you. It's amazing.
You just can't make that up because I went into it again. And I think part of the magic of it for me was that I was so non-intentional about the emotional component to how it was so life-changing to me. And I think that added to it just being organically so much goodness came out of it because I wasn't expecting all that. Like I was funny ha-ha girl
Right.
trying to write a book because people have asked me, did you work with a therapist? I was like, no, I've worked with therapists since then, though, because I didn't realize I had a need for that until after the fact, you know.
Well, I want to kind of interject with that because it's something I think about with my own upbringing. The definition of the definite, how do I say this gracefully without like everybody deciding to cancel me? The definition of abuse in 2025 has gotten so loose that
Hmm.
we think that people think that they're abused when someone looks at them the wrong way in the supermarket.
Right.
And but for people who were raised in the 70s and probably the late 60s, like we tolerated a lot of things that maybe were not so great. I don't think it was okay that we had a lot of at the very least, like what you could call neglect.
Right.
There's a lot
Right.
of like your feelings don't matter, like just, suck it up, buttercup, which is not necessarily a great way to raise a kid either?
No, and that's what all yeah, the baggage comes from.
Yeah,
And when
absolutely.
I wrote myself back, I saw a lot of my feelings were validated, and that was very difficult
Right.
because then I had to navigate, oh, wait, I am the least favorite child.
Yeah.
And then these are questions that can never be answered, like why? She doesn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also realized she loves me, because there's conversations in the book where I talk to her as an adult and we're watching the kids and she's like, I love Amy. I wish I could be more like her. She says that to me. And I think that's a valid thing because she's told me since, I mean, that was part of the conversations we had when I was writing the book, but it's so emotionally, like there's so many layers of it for me. It's just funny to read back through it. And it's just because again, like anybody else, I write it different if I was going to write it again
Yeah.
because because I progressed so much because of it. You know, I didn't realize that, you know, taking myself seriously, even though my story wasn't exceptional, it wasn't going to be on the front of People magazine, that in writing the story, I realized I set myself free because I took my own stuff seriously enough to think about it and to share it and to do something about it.
Yeah. There's so much value in that. I think that if you grow up in a regular home with like what we think of as like regular abuse, it's not, or you don't want to call it abuse. Abuse doesn't even feels like a dramatic way to put it. But like the regular flawed parents who made a lot of mistakes.
Right. And we're doing the best they could.
In the best way.
And doing the best they could. But still, that doesn't mean just because somebody was doing the best that they could, that there's not impact on your life that could be negative.
Absolutely. What are your hopes for this book? Would you want to develop this? Because I think it would make an amazing like television series.
Right,
Is
right.
that your hope for it? A movie, a TV series?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it would sell because of the nostalgia factor. Again, it's relatable in a way. It's so human. Whether, my kids have told me they read it and thought, what about if I went back in time? Even if you didn't grow up in the 70s, but that nostalgia factor is, especially as you aptly pointed out, at this point in our lives as midlife people, our kids have left, now we're looking back, or our kids haven't left, but we're at the end of our career and our parents are passing away, which leads us to having all these deep thoughts about looking back. So perfectly played, but is so relatable. There's not very many people who wouldn't. And I love to see people tick, 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 put themselves in the same position because it's so powerful. It's so powerful. So it absolutely would sell because it would be such a visual. The book does a good job of describing the 70s. It'd be delicious for me to watch
Delicious.
the
Absolutely
70s.
delicious.
Delicious. We'd have to smoke
Absolutely.
cigarettes afterwards. I mean, it'd
Oh
be
my
so good.
God, it was so good. Do you ever think about writing a companion book to this where you go into the future and visit your 85-year-old self?
Yeah, I've thought about that. And there's a great one of my favorite parts of the book is I'm saying goodbye to my nuclear family before I get in the car back in the big, huge Ford LTD, to take off to the airport with my time travel guide, Mary. And I'm saying goodbye to each one of them. And when I'm hugging little Amy, I'm like, neither of us want to end. We're just holding on too tight. And I don't care that my mom and dad, my brother and sister are like, what's up? These two like each other more than they like anyone else. And I think, somewhere in the azalea bushes, the older Amy, the 85-year-old Amy's, bawling in the flowers just off the left, saying, guys, it's going to work out great. You guys are going to be fine, but this is the best moment ever. And so, yeah, that little moment has made me think, what happens if little Amy goes all the way in the future or middle Amy, or they go together, which would even
Oh
be
my
better.
God, that would be amazing. I want you to write that so badly.
Yeah, hold her hand all the way. And, again, and maybe I should do something with my relationship with little Amy because it's like a separate relationship for me. It's not crazy at all. It's so natural and absolutely so, it's just so meaningful to me. Like it's a relationship I didn't know I had.
Yeah. I desperately want you to write the book where you go into the future and visit your 85-year-old self and get her wisdom too. Because I really do think, like, not to get like too woo-woo or out there, but I really do think we are all those people all at once. We are our 6-year-old self, we're our 10-year-old self, we're our 12-year-old self, we're our 28-year-old selves, we're all those people, and we're our 85-year-old self all at once.
I think you're right. And that's where time travel is possible. Time
Yes.
travel is possible because of that, with a bunch of memories, a bunch of layers. And I think that I liked what you said at the beginning of this conversation when you said, I look at the inner child thing and think, that's kind of, yeah, like exactly. I don't know what word you use. Creepy, maybe.
That's because we're cynical children of the 70s that we were told our feelings don't matter. So we're like, gross. Like, what do you mean inner child? That's so icky and creepy.
Right, right. And there's a scene in the book where Mary's telling me I have to go into the house. And I was like, oh, I don't need to go in there. I know what happened in there. And she said, you have questions that you haven't even asked the questions. It's not so much about the answers. You haven't even asked the questions. You have to go in. And that's the whole play on what you're saying. Like, we don't talk about our feelings. Like, I'm good. Let's go. But
Yeah.
then it turned out to be the most valuable emotional journeys of my entire life was taking that step through the threshold of the door. And I just did it in my own head. And I had somebody ask me last week, I was talking about this book on another podcast, and they said, what would you recommend for other people to take this same journey? And I think that's so personal. I don't think you have to write a book about it, but I do think just based on my own experience, this can be manufactured in your head with journaling or however you choose to do it. But I think it's like anything else in life. There's not a blueprint for it. You have to meet it where it is, and you have to follow your own path, and you just need to be cheered on while you're doing it.
Absolutely. So where can people find this amazing book? Where readers find it? Is it on Amazon?
It's
Is it
on
on?
Amazon. It's on wherever fine books are sold. I like to say that fine books as if it is. I mean, maybe it is a fine book,
It
but I
is
like it.
it's better than a fine. It's a great book. I poured into it. I loved it. It touched my heart. I thought it was absolutely amazing and genius.
Well, that's very humbling, and I appreciate that. And, independent bookstores are a dying breed. So there's a website, bookshop.org. And if you don't have a local favorite, you can go down and order it because it's not going to be, it's not going to be sitting on the shelf of a little bookstore probably. But if it is, please email me and send me a picture and I'll celebrate it. But if you use bookshop.org, you'll support some little bookstore that's just trying to stay open and be accessible. But Amazon, of course, you'll have it, in 2 days on the Zon. And we appreciate it, no matter how you get it.
I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me about your book. I'm going to add a link in the show notes to it, to your social media, to your website. And is there anywhere else that you would like me to, anything else you would like me to include?
No, that's great. I mean, my website's got all the info.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife, and you can check out my offerings on my website, yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individual and small group coaching, as well as luxury retreats for women in midlife and beyond who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. You can book a complimentary discovery call in the calendar link in my show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. And I will talk to you next week.